Man rescues starving dog family from construction site. Then this happens and everyone's in tears. The cold winter wind howled through the abandoned construction site, carrying with it the faint whimpers that caught John Miller's attention. At 42, John was no stranger to the sounds of the city, but something about these cries tugged at his heart. John had been cutting through the construction site on his way home from his job at the local hardware store, as he often did. The half-finished buildings and piles of materials created a maze-like shortcut that shaved precious minutes off his commute. But today, something was different. Following the sound, John found himself at the edge of a deep hole, likely dug for a foundation and then abandoned when the project halted. Peering down, his breath caught in his throat. There, huddled in the corner, was a sight that would change his life forever. A large, emaciated dog lay curled around 6 tiny puppies, her body providing what little warmth and protection she could muster against the biting cold. The mother dog's ribs were clearly visible through her matted fur, and her eyes, when they met John's, were filled with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "Oh, you poor things," John murmured, his heart breaking at the sight. Without a second thought, he shrugged off his backpack and began rummaging through it. He always packed a lunch, and today he was grateful for that habit. Carefully, John made his way down into the hole. The mother dog watched him warily, a low growl rumbling in her throat as he approached. "It's okay, girl," John said softly, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "I'm not going to hurt you. I've got some food here for you." He unwrapped his sandwich and held it out, staying still as the dog's nose twitched, catching the scent of food. Slowly, tentatively, she stretched her neck out, snatching the sandwich from his hand and devouring it in seconds. John's eyes stung with tears as he watched her eat. How long had she been down here? How had she managed to keep her puppies alive? As the dog licked the last crumbs from the ground, her eyes met John's again, and this time, there was a glimmer of trust there. "That's it, girl," John said, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm going to help you. You and your babies are going to be okay." As the reality of the situation sank in, John realized he had a monumental task ahead of him. He couldn't leave this family here in the cold, but how was he going to get them all out safely? Pulling out his phone, John called the one person he knew he could count on. "Hey, Sarah? It's John. I need your help. Can you bring your car to the old construction site on 5th Street? And bring some blankets and any dog food you might have." Sarah, John's younger sister and a veterinary technician, arrived 20 minutes later, her car packed with supplies. Together, they carefully lifted each puppy out of the hole, wrapping them in warm blankets and placing them in a large box in the back of Sarah's car. The mother dog, weak as she was, watched their every move, her eyes never leaving her puppies. When it came time to lift her out, she allowed John to pick her up, seeming to understand that he was there to help. As they drove to John's small apartment, Sarah examined the dogs as best she could. "They're severely malnourished and dehydrated," she said, her voice tight with concern. "The puppies can't be more than a few weeks old. It's a miracle they've survived this long." John nodded, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. "What do we do now?" Sarah sighed, gently stroking the mother dog's head. "They need food, warmth, and medical attention. But mostly, they need time and care. Are you sure you're up for this, John? It's going to be a lot of work." John glanced in the rearview mirror at the box of puppies, then at the mother dog curled up on Sarah's lap. There was no question in his mind. "I'm sure," he said firmly. "Whatever it takes, I'm going to help these dogs." As they pulled up to John's apartment building, he knew his life was about to change dramatically. But looking at the vulnerable family of dogs in his care, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. John's small one-bedroom apartment was hardly ideal for housing 7 dogs, but it would have to do. He and Sarah worked quickly to set up a comfortable space in the living room, laying down old blankets and towels to create a soft, warm nest for the mother and her puppies. "We need to get some food and water into them as soon as possible," Sarah said, her veterinary training kicking in. "The mother dog is severely dehydrated. We'll need to introduce water slowly to avoid shock. John nodded, following Sarah's instructions carefully. They started with small amounts of water, offering it to the mother dog in a shallow bowl. She lapped it up eagerly, her tail wagging weakly in gratitude. "Good girl," John murmured, gently stroking her head. He had already started thinking of her as Hope, a name that seemed fitting given their circumstances. As Hope regained some strength, Sarah showed John how to prepare a mixture of puppy formula and softened kibble for the little ones. "They're old enough to start on solid food," she explained, "but we need to make it easy for them to digest." Over the next few hours, John and Sarah took turns feeding the puppies, marveling at their tiny squeaks and determined little faces. Despite their ordeal, the puppies seemed resilient, eagerly accepting the nourishment offered to them. It was well past midnight when Sarah finally prepared to leave. "I'll come back tomorrow to check on them," she promised, giving John a hug. "You've done a wonderful thing, John. These dogs wouldn't have survived another night out there." After Sarah left, John settled onto the couch, his eyes fixed on the sleeping dog family. Hope lay curled protectively around her puppies, but her eyes were open, watching John warily. "It's okay, girl," he said softly. "You're safe now. I promise I'll take care of you and your babies." As if understanding his words, Hope's tail thumped gently against the blanket. John smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. He had always loved dogs but had never owned one, his small apartment and long work hours making it impractical. Now, he had 7 dogs depending on him, and despite the enormity of the task ahead, he felt more alive than he had in years. The next few days were a blur of feedings, cleanings, and veterinary visits. Sarah brought vaccines and medications from the clinic where she worked, and slowly but surely, the dogs began to improve. Hope's ribs became less prominent as she regained weight, and her dull coat started to regain its luster. The puppies grew stronger each day, their eyes opening to reveal a world full of wonder. John found himself falling into a new routine. He would wake up early to feed and clean up after the dogs before heading to work. During his lunch break, he would rush home to check on them, and evenings were spent playing with the increasingly active puppies and giving Hope the attention and care she so desperately needed. It wasn't easy. John's apartment was constantly a mess. His sleep was interrupted by whimpering puppies, and his savings were quickly dwindling with the cost of food and supplies. But every time he looked at Hope's trusting eyes or felt the soft warmth of a puppy snuggling into his hand, he knew it was all worth it. One evening, about 2 weeks after rescuing the dogs, John noticed something concerning about Hope. She seemed lethargic, and there was a swelling in her abdomen that hadn't been there before. Worried, he called Sarah, who came over immediately. After examining Hope, Sarah's face was grave. "John, I think Hope has a tumor in her abdomen," she said quietly. "It's probably been there for a while, but now that she's regaining weight, it's becoming more noticeable." John felt his heart sink. "What does that mean? Is she going to be okay?" Sarah sighed. "She needs surgery, John. It's the only way to know for sure if the tumor is benign or malignant, and to remove it either way." John nodded, his mind racing. He knew veterinary surgery would be expensive, and he had already spent a significant portion of his savings on caring for the dogs. But looking at Hope, who had fought so hard to keep her puppies alive, he knew he couldn't give up on her now. "We'll do it," he said firmly. "Whatever it takes, we'll get her the surgery she needs." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparations. Sarah helped John find a reputable veterinary surgeon who was willing to perform the operation at a discounted rate after hearing Hope's story. Still, the cost was substantial, and John found himself dipping into his emergency fund to cover it. The morning of the surgery, John gently loaded Hope into his car. The puppies, now 3 weeks old and full of energy, whined as their mother was taken away. John had arranged for a neighbor to check on them throughout the day, but he still felt a pang of guilt as he drove off, leaving the little ones behind. At the veterinary clinic, Hope seemed to sense the gravity of the situation. She pressed close to John's side as they waited, her brown eyes looking up at him trustingly. John knelt down, stroking her head gently. "You're going to be okay, girl," he murmured. "You're the strongest dog I've ever met. You've got 6 little ones waiting for you at home, and I promise I'll be right here when you wake up." When it was time for Hope to go into surgery, John felt as if he was sending a member of his own family off. The hours of waiting were agonizing. He paced the clinic's waiting room, alternating between worry for Hope and concern for the puppy's back at his apartment. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the surgeon emerged. John held his breath, searching the doctor's face for any sign of the outcome. "Mr. Miller," the surgeon said, a small smile forming on his face, "I'm pleased to tell you that the surgery was successful. We were able to remove the entire tumor, and while we'll need to run some tests to be certain, it appears to be benign." John felt his knees go weak with relief. "Can I see her?" he asked eagerly. The surgeon nodded. "She's still under anesthesia, but you can sit with her while she wakes up. She'll need to stay here for a few days to recover, but barring any complications, she should be able to go home by the end of the week." As John sat beside Hope's sleeping form, gently stroking her fur, he marveled at the journey they had been on together. Just a few weeks ago, she had been a starving stray, fighting to keep her puppies alive in a cold, abandoned construction site. Now, she was on her way to a full recovery and a life filled with love and care. The days of Hope's recovery were challenging. John split his time between the veterinary clinic and his apartment, caring for Hope and the puppies in turns. The little ones were growing rapidly, their personalities beginning to emerge. John found himself falling in love with each of them, even as he knew he couldn't keep them all forever. Finally, the day came when Hope was ready to come home. As John carried her into the apartment, he was unprepared for the joyous reunion that followed. The puppies, who had been somewhat subdued in their mother's absence, erupted into a chorus of excited yips and whines. Hope, still weak from her surgery, was nevertheless overjoyed to see her babies, licking each of them thoroughly as if to reassure herself that they were all there and safe. Watching the family reunite, John felt a lump form in his throat. He had always lived alone, his job and his quiet nature making it difficult to form close relationships. But now, his small apartment was filled with life and love in a way he had never experienced before. As the weeks passed, Hope regained her strength, and the puppies grew into rambunctious balls of fur. John's apartment was a constant whirlwind of activity, with puppy toys strewn about and the sound of playful barks filling the air at all hours. Despite the chaos, John had never been happier. He found himself looking forward to coming home from work each day, eager to see what new adventures his canine family had gotten up to in his absence. However, he knew that this idyllic situation couldn't last forever. The puppies were growing rapidly, and his small apartment was becoming increasingly cramped. As much as it pained him to think about it, John knew he would need to find homes for most of the puppies. 2 months after the rescue, John sat down with Sarah to discuss the future of the puppies. "They're old enough to be adopted now," Sarah said gently, seeing the conflicted look on her brother's face. "I know it's hard, John, but we need to think about what's best for them." John nodded, his eyes drifting to where the puppies were playing in a tangle of paws and wagging tails. "I know you're right. I've grown so attached to them all." Sarah squeezed his hand reassuringly. "You've given them an amazing start in life, John. Now we need to find them loving, forever homes where they can thrive." Over the next few weeks, John and Sarah worked together to find suitable homes for the puppies. They carefully screened potential adopters, ensuring that each puppy would go to a family that could provide the love and care they deserved. The first to be adopted was a little male puppy with a white patch on his chest. A young couple with a large backyard fell in love with him instantly, promising to send regular updates and photos. John felt a mixture of joy and sadness as he watched the puppy leave, knowing he was going to a wonderful home but already missing his playful presence. Next went 2 of the female puppies, adopted together by a family with 2 young children. The kids had been so excited, promising to take the puppies on lots of walks and play with them every day. John couldn't help but smile at their enthusiasm, even as he felt another piece of his heart go with the puppies. The fourth puppy to find a new home was the runt of the litter, a small male with oversized paws that hinted at how big he might grow. A retired couple fell in love with his gentle nature, and John knew they would give him all the attention and love he could ever want. With each adoption, John's apartment grew a little quieter, a little emptier. Hope seemed to understand what was happening, watching with wise eyes as her puppies went off to their new lives. She would whine softly each time one left, but she also seemed to sense that they were going to good homes. In the end, John decided to keep two of the puppies, a male and a female, along with Hope. He couldn't bear to part with all of them, and he knew that Hope would be happier with some of her offspring around. As he watched the last of the adopted puppies leave, John felt a complex mix of emotions. There was sadness, of course, at saying goodbye to the little ones he had cared for since their first days. But there was also a profound sense of accomplishment and joy. These puppies, who had started life in such dire circumstances, were now going off to loving homes where they would be cherished and cared for. That evening, as John sat on his couch with Hope curled up beside him and the two remaining puppies playing at his feet, he reflected on how much his life had changed in just a few short months. His once quiet, orderly apartment was now filled with the sounds of barking and the patter of paw steps. His savings had taken a hit, and his free time was now devoted to walks, playtime, and training sessions. But as Hope looked up at him with her soulful brown eyes, full of trust and love, John knew he wouldn't have it any other way. This unexpected family had brought a richness to his life that he had never known he was missing. "We did it, girl," he murmured, scratching Hope behind the ears. "You kept your babies safe until I found you, and now they're all off to wonderful lives. You're an amazing mom." Hope's tail thumped against the couch cushion, and she lifted her head to lick John's hand. In that moment, John felt a wave of contentment wash over him. He had set out to save a family of dogs, but in truth they had saved him too, bringing love, purpose, and joy into his life. As he drifted off to sleep that night, the warmth of Hope beside him and the soft snores of the puppies from their bed on the floor, John knew that his life would never be the same again, and he was grateful for it. As the weeks turned into months, John, Hope, and the two puppies, whom he had named Max and Luna, settled into a comfortable routine. John's apartment, once spartanly furnished and quiet, was now a cozy haven filled with dog beds, toys, and the constant patter of paws. John found himself looking forward to each day in a way he never had before. Mornings began with eager, wet noses pushing against his hand, urging him out of bed for walks and breakfast. Evenings were spent playing in the local dog park, where Hope would watch proudly as Max and Luna romped with other dogs. It was during one of these evening outings that John's life took another unexpected turn. As he sat on a bench, watching his dogs play, a woman approached him, her eyes fixed on Hope. "Excuse me," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "But is that the dog from the construction site rescue? The one that was all over the local news a few months ago?" John nodded, surprised. He had given a brief interview to a local news station shortly after the rescue, but he hadn't realized the story had made such an impact. The woman introduced herself as Emily, a volunteer at the local animal shelter. "Your story inspired so many people," she explained. "We've seen a significant increase in adoptions and donations since it aired. People were really moved by what you did for Hope and her puppies." As they chatted, Emily shared some of the challenges the shelter faced: overcrowding, limited resources, and a constant stream of animals in need. John found himself deeply affected by her passion and the scope of the problem. That night, as he lay in bed with Hope curled up beside him, John couldn't stop thinking about his conversation with Emily. He thought about how close Hope and her puppies had come to tragedy, and how many other animals out there weren't as fortunate. Over the next few weeks, John began volunteering at the shelter. He started small, walking dogs and helping with feedings, but soon he was dedicating most of his free time to the cause. He used his experience with Hope to work with some of the more traumatized animals, showing infinite patience as he helped them learn to trust again. His involvement didn't stop there. John started a social media campaign, sharing stories of the shelter animals and their needs. He organized fundraisers and adoption events, often bringing Hope, Max, and Luna along as ambassadors for the cause. Hope, in particular, seemed to thrive in this new role. Her gentle nature and the visible scar from her surgery told a story of resilience that resonated with many potential adopters. More than once, John watched as someone who had been hesitant about adoption knelt down to pet Hope and ended up leaving with a new furry family member. As John's passion for animal rescue grew, he began to feel increasingly unfulfilled in his job at the hardware store. He found himself daydreaming about ways to help more animals, to make a bigger difference. It was Sarah who finally gave voice to what John had been feeling. "You know," she said one evening as they watched the dogs play in John's living room, "you could do this full-time. The shelter's been looking for a new outreach coordinator. With everything you've done, I bet you'd be perfect for the job." The idea took root in John's mind, growing stronger with each passing day. It would mean a significant pay cut and a complete change of career. But every time he looked at Hope, remembering the scared, emaciated dog he had found in that construction site, he knew what he had to do. 2 weeks later, John handed in his resignation at the hardware store. The following Monday, he started his new job at the animal shelter, his heart full of excitement and purpose. His first day was chaos. A litter of kittens had just been brought in, and one of the older dogs had managed to escape its kennel. But as John moved through the shelter, soothing anxious animals and coordinating volunteers, he felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced in his previous job. As weeks turned into months, John's impact on the shelter became increasingly evident. His social media campaigns had significantly increased the shelter's visibility, resulting in a surge of adoptions and donations. His personal touch, sharing individual stories of the animals and their journeys, resonated with the community in a way that generic appeals never had. One of John's most successful initiatives was the Hope's Heroes program, named after his own rescue dog. The program paired long-term shelter residents with volunteer foster families, giving these animals a break from shelter life and a chance to showcase their true personalities in a home environment. The success rate for adoptions through this program was remarkably high. Hope, Max, and Luna became regular fixtures at the shelter. Hope, in particular, seemed to have a special gift for comforting the most traumatized animals. More than once, John watched in amazement as Hope gently approached a terrified dog or cat, somehow communicating a sense of safety and understanding that no human could match. As John's first year at the shelter drew to a close, he received an unexpected call from a local television station. They wanted to do a follow-up story on Hope and the puppies, showcasing how one act of kindness had sparked a wave of change in the community. The day of the interview, John brought Hope to the shelter, where they met with the reporter in the play yard. As the cameras rolled, John recounted the story of finding Hope and her puppies, his voice thick with emotion as he described their journey. "But the real story," John said, his hand resting gently on Hope's head, "is what happened after. Hope didn't just survive, she thrived. And in doing so, she inspired so many others to open their hearts to animals in need." The reporter nodded, clearly moved. "And what about the puppies?" she asked. John smiled. "They're all doing wonderfully. In fact," on cue, Sarah entered the play yard, followed by the families who had adopted the other 4 puppies. It had taken some coordinating, but John had managed to arrange a reunion for the interview. The scene that followed was chaos of the best kind. Hope's tail wagged furiously as she was reunited with her grown puppies, each now a healthy, happy adult dog. The adoptive families shared stories of how these dogs had changed their lives, bringing joy, love, and in one case, even helping a child overcome his fear of animals. As John watched the joyful reunion, he felt a lump form in his throat. This was why he did what he did. Every animal deserved a chance at a happy ending like this. The story aired the following week, and the response was overwhelming. The shelter was flooded with calls from people wanting to adopt, volunteer, or donate. John's phone rang off the hook with interview requests from other media outlets and invitations to speak at events. In the midst of all the excitement, John received a letter that brought tears to his eyes. It was from Chuck, the man who had adopted the runt of Hope's litter. Chuck wrote about how the little dog, now named Buddy, had become his constant companion, helping him through the loneliness of retirement and even motivating him to get out and exercise more. "I never thought a dog could change my life so much," Chuck wrote. "But thanks to you and Hope, I found a new best friend. Buddy has given me a reason to get up every morning, and for that, I'll be forever grateful." As John read the letter aloud to Hope, who listened with her head tilted attentively, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. From that cold, abandoned construction site to this moment, they had come so far, and yet John knew their journey was far from over. The story of Hope and her puppies had started a ripple effect of compassion and change that was still spreading. John realized that their impact extended far beyond just the animals they had directly helped. As the shelter's reputation grew, so did the challenges it faced. More people were bringing in animals, and while adoptions had increased, they still struggled to keep up with the influx. John knew they needed to think bigger. One evening, as he sat on his couch brainstorming ideas, Hope resting her head on his lap, John had an epiphany. What if they could create a sanctuary, a place not just for temporary shelter, but for rehabilitation, education, and long-term care for animals that might never be adopted? The idea took hold, and John couldn't shake it. He spent weeks researching, talking to experts, and developing a proposal. When he finally presented it to the shelter's board of directors, he was nervous but confident in his vision. "Imagine," he said, pointing to the designs he had drawn up, "a place where animals can heal, both physically and emotionally, where people can come to learn about responsible pet ownership, animal welfare, and the incredible bonds we can form with animals. We could have programs for children, therapy sessions for people with disabilities or PTSD, and even a retirement home for older animals." The board was impressed, but concerned about the cost. It would take a massive fundraising effort to make this dream a reality. But John was undeterred. He knew that if he could share his vision with others the way Hope had shared her love with him, anything was possible. Over the next year, John threw himself into making the sanctuary a reality. He organized fundraisers, gave speeches, and even took Hope on a road trip to visit other successful sanctuaries around the country. Everywhere they went, Hope's gentle presence and incredible story opened hearts and wallets. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks and moments of doubt. But every time John felt discouraged, he'd look at Hope, remembering the scared, emaciated dog he'd found in that construction site. If she could overcome such adversity, he could face any challenge. Finally, after months of hard work and dedication, they broke ground on Hope's Haven Animal Sanctuary. The local community turned out in force for the groundbreaking ceremony, with Hope, Max, and Luna as the guests of honor. As John stood at the podium, looking out over the crowd, he felt overwhelmed with emotion. "This sanctuary," he said, his voice thick with feeling, "is a testament to the power of compassion. It started with one small act of kindness, rescuing a mother dog and her puppies. But that act created a ripple effect that has touched countless lives, both human and animal." He paused, looking down at Hope, who sat calmly by his side. "Hope taught me that every life has value, that even in the darkest moments, there's always room for love and second chances. This sanctuary will be a place where that lesson is lived every day." As the crowd applauded, John knelt down to hug Hope, whispering in her ear, "We did it, girl. We really did it." The construction of Hope's Haven took another year, during which John split his time between overseeing the project and continuing his work at the shelter. It was exhausting, but every time he visited the site and saw the progress, he felt energized. Finally, the day came when Hope's Haven was ready to open its doors. The sanctuary was everything John had dreamed of and more. There were spacious, comfortable enclosures for the animals, a state-of-the-art veterinary clinic, educational facilities, and even a memorial garden where people could honor pets they had lost. On opening day, John stood at the entrance, greeting visitors with hope by his side. As he watched families exploring the sanctuary, children's eyes wide with wonder as they learned about animal care, John felt a sense of completion. But he also knew that this was just the beginning. There would always be more animals in need, more work to be done. But now, thanks to Hope and the journey they had started together, they had created a place where love, compassion, and second chances could flourish. As Hope's haven flourished, John found himself busier than ever. The sanctuary quickly became a beacon of hope in the animal welfare community, with people coming from all over the country to learn from their programs and practices. One crisp autumn morning, 5 years after the sanctuary's opening, John received a call that would bring their journey full circle. "Mr. Miller?" a hesitant voice said when he answered. "My name is Tom. I found some puppies at an abandoned construction site. I remembered your story, and I didn't know who else to call." John's heart raced as he listened to Tom's description of the situation. It was eerily similar to how he had found Hope and her puppies all those years ago. "You did the right thing, Tom," he assured the caller. "Can you stay with them? I'll be there as soon as I can." Hanging up, John turned to Hope, who was watching him with her wise brown eyes. "What do you say, girl? Ready for one more rescue?" Hope's tail wagged in response, and together they headed out. As they drove to the construction site, John couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. From that first desperate rescue to now, heading out to save another family of dogs, with a whole sanctuary of support behind them. When they arrived at the site, John's breath caught in his throat. The scene was so similar to that day years ago. A frightened mother dog huddled protectively around her whimpering puppies. But this time, John wasn't alone. He had Hope by his side, and all the resources of Hope's Haven to help. As they approached the dogs, Hope took the lead. With gentle whines and wagging tail, she communicated to the frightened mother that they were there to help. John watched in awe as the mother dog, initially defensive, slowly relaxed under Hope's influence. "It's okay," John murmured, echoing the words he had spoken to Hope so long ago. "We're here to help. You're safe now." With Tom's help, they carefully loaded the mother and her 5 puppies into John's van. As they drove back to the sanctuary, John glanced in the rearview mirror at the rescued family, then at Hope sitting calmly in the passenger seat. "You know, Hope," he said softly, "I think this might be your most important job yet. Showing these dogs that there's a better life waiting for them, just like you discovered." Back at the sanctuary, the new family was settled into a comfortable, quiet space. The mother dog, whom the staff quickly dubbed Destiny, was wary but allowed the veterinarians to examine her and her puppies. Just like Hope had been, she was malnourished and in need of medical care, but her prognosis was good. Over the next few weeks, John watched as Hope took on a mentorship role with Destiny. The 2 dogs would often be seen sitting together, Hope's presence seeming to provide comfort and reassurance to the recovering mother. As Destiny and her puppies grew stronger, John was reminded of his own journey with Hope. He saw the same fear and uncertainty in Destiny's eyes slowly being replaced by trust and hope. And just like before, he fell in love with each of the puppies, marveling at their resilience and joy. When the time came to find homes for the puppies, John insisted on overseeing the process personally. He wanted to ensure that each puppy, and Destiny herself, found families who would love them as much as he loved Hope. The day the last puppy was adopted, John found himself sitting in the sanctuary's memorial garden, Hope lying contentedly at his feet. As he stroked her graying muzzle, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. "You know, Hope," he said softly, "when I found you that day, I thought I was saving you. But the truth is, you saved me. You gave me a purpose, a calling. You showed me the power of compassion and second chances." Hope lifted her head, looking at John with those soulful brown eyes that still held the same trust and love they had when he first rescued her. She gave a soft woof, as if agreeing with his words. As the years passed, Hope's Haven continued to grow and evolve. The sanctuary became known not just for its animal rescue work, but also for its innovative programs in animal-assisted therapy, humane education, and community outreach. Hope, despite her advancing age, remained a constant presence at the sanctuary. She had a special talent for comforting the most traumatized animals, and visitors would often find her curled up next to a nervous newcomer, offering silent support. On Hope's estimated 15th birthday, since her exact age was unknown when John found her, the sanctuary held a special celebration. Families who had adopted animals from Hope's Haven over the years came to pay tribute to the dog who had started it all. The event was filled with joyful reunions, heartwarming stories, and more than a few happy tears. John, now in his late 50s, watched the proceedings with a heart full of pride and love. He knelt down next to Hope, who was resting on her special bed, gray around the muzzle but still alert and content. "Look at all of this, girl," he said softly, gesturing to the crowd. "All of these lives you've touched, all of this joy you've brought into the world. And it all started because you were brave enough to trust a stranger who offered you a sandwich." Hope's tail thumped weakly against her bed, her eyes fixed lovingly on John's face. As the years continued to pass, John knew that Hope's time was growing short. She moved more slowly now, and spent more time resting than playing. But her spirit remained as strong as ever, and her presence continued to be a source of comfort and inspiration to everyone at the sanctuary. One quiet evening, as John sat on the porch of his small house on the sanctuary grounds, Hope resting at his feet as she had done countless times before, he felt a subtle shift in the air. Hope lifted her head, her eyes meeting John's with an intensity that took his breath away. "It's okay, girl," John said softly, his voice choked with emotion. "You've done so much. You've loved so well. If it's time to rest, that's okay." Hope stood up slowly, pressing her head against John's hand one last time. Then, with a soft sigh, she lay down and closed her eyes. John sat with her through the night, his hand resting gently on her side, feeling her breathing slow and finally stop as the first light of dawn broke over the sanctuary. In the days that followed, condolences poured in from all over the country. Hope's story had touched so many lives, and her passing was felt deeply by all who had known her or heard her tale. The sanctuary held a memorial service, planting a beautiful cherry tree in Hope's memory in the center of the property. As John watched the tree being planted, surrounded by the staff, volunteers, and animals of Hope's Haven, he felt a profound sense of both loss and gratitude. "Hope's life," he said, addressing the gathered crowd, "was a testament to the power of love and second chances. She taught us that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope. That one small act of kindness can change a life forever. Her legacy will live on in every animal we rescue, every life we touch, and every heart we open." As the years passed, Hope's Haven continued to thrive. The cherry tree grew tall and strong, its branches spreading wide over the sanctuary, much like Hope's influence had spread throughout their lives. Every spring, when it burst into bloom, John was reminded of the beauty that can grow from the most unlikely beginnings. And though Hope was gone, her spirit lived on in every wagging tail, every purring cat, and every act of compassion that took place at the sanctuary that bore her name. John knew that as long as Hope's Haven stood, as long as there were people willing to open their hearts to animals in need, Hope's legacy of love would never truly end.